This is Caffeinated Risk, the monthly podcast for security professionals by security professionals, focused on the principles of enterprise security risk management, exploring technology and business management issues and how they relate to information security risk. Once a month, two self-proclaimed grumpy security guys bring you analysis, insights, and interviews with leading security risk professionals to learn how they work through a project, a program, or their careers using a risk-based approach to security. Now here are your hosts, Tim McCreet and Doug Leese.
Welcome to Caffeinated Risk. This is the last show of 2021. I just want to thank everyone who's been listening and telling their friends. We can see every month there's a few more people listening, and this is a subject that people are interested in cybersecurity now. There's a lot of good technical stuff out there, but I think where we're coming from is the tech comes and goes. In fact, just before I hit the record button, we were talking about the exciting day when I was the very first consumer of Shaw cable modem services in Chestermere, and I was showing off my whopping 300 kilobits a second speed.
Scary.
And Tim is now a new homeowner. And what's your current download speed, Mr. McCreet?
We're at about 400 meg a download. This is awesome. So
400 megs. Yeah, I was just over 300 little bitty Ks, and that was B with a little b. You know? And that was what, 20-ish years ago.
It doesn't seem that long though, right? Like that's, in one generation you've seen that kind of that's not an incremental change. That's a step change, right? In the technology that we're seeing at home.
Absolutely. Right? In fact, I just read Bill Gates, not so much good riddance to 2021, but reasons to be positive going forward. And one of the original Microsoft tenets was information at your fingertips. And I remember reading a later book of his, I think it was The Speed of Thought, or I think it was the second book. He had talked about these fundamental changes in the world that'll come about when something that used to be difficult or complicated is suddenly, free.
Yep.
And if we had COVID 20 years ago, there's no way that working from home would have been a real thing at even a whopping 300 kilobits a second.
Yeah, exactly.
And now it's there. So the technology is going to come and go. But some of the concepts we've been talking about with risk management, you can find that in Sun Tzu 2,000 years ago. So,
absolutely. Right.
Business and human nature doesn't seem to change very much.
No, and it's funny because I talk about this often, as this idea of risk beginning with insurance started back with Lloyd's of London, and it was a bar on Lloyd Street in the city of London, and it was merchants who were sending ships to the New World, and they wanted to insure against the loss of their cargo. We've been dealing with actuarial tables and statistics on how long we're going to live based on our current condition, and this is going to sound horrific, but they're deadly accurate with these stats because they've been collecting them for so long. A personal note, I've had to go through my very first set of physicals for an insurance policy. First time I've ever had to do that in my life, right? But it's because I hit a certain age that now I actually have to prove I'm healthy and that I'm not smoking every day or drinking every day or eating bad diet. Like I had to give a blood test and a urine test in my own home. I'm like, what the hell is this? And then I realized, well, wait a second. Statistically, in my age group, this is when the wheels start to fall off. And I'm like, all right, I get it. It drove home this whole point that the idea of looking at things from a risk-based perspective had been around way before the security profession even started.
Yeah.
And we're so far behind in this that this is what I love about our podcast, Doug, is that we're taking time to poke around in a space where we haven't spent a lot of time. But the insurance agencies, the medical practitioners, those folks have been doing this for centuries, and they got really good at it. So we got some things we got to catch up on. Like there's a big road ahead of us to get better at this, but I think we're making that start.
Well, and thinking back to last month's episode, I'm of two minds of this. I agree that we have a long way to go, and when I talk with people in the ICS world, or I think to the medical models that we're referring to, there's a lot of, how should we say it? There's a lot of predictability in the failure. You
Yeah.
can
Yep.
you can actually measure if you count 1 million people, and let's stay on the morbidity thing because it's 2021.
Yeah, because we're getting near the end of this year. So yep.
Right. So,
Yep.
you can count how many people are likely going to die in a given year based on the population and
Yep.
certain things. And you can trend that over time. And
Mm-hmm.
they've got some tangible things that they can measure.
Sure.
But
Yep.
when you think about how long people lived 100 years ago,
Oh,
how
yeah.
long they lived 200 years ago, there's sort of a logical progression. But when we look at what was the internet speed
Oh,
20 years ago,
yep.
and what's a good connection from the exact same cable company? Like, I want to point that out. Like, that hasn't changed. It's
Yeah,
still, and there's a good chance that some of the copper wire that was used in that plant is still in that plant. Like, these
exactly.
these
Yep.
infrastructures don't change overnight, and yet suddenly the speed is gigantic. Some of that risk conversation now suddenly goes out the window.
It does, right?
I think in some ways this is uncharted territory as well. So I don't know, let's pretend, let's backtrack 3 years. What would you do if you woke up tomorrow and found out that you couldn't trust the microprocessor architecture to keep all the information inside the processes that you expected?
Yeah.
And you
Yep.
went to sleep the night before thinking VMware was secure from side channel attacks.
Yeah. Now what?
And then
Right?
Spectre happened.
Yep.
Because you don't know
Yep.
when that's going to flip overnight. So, from a cyber perspective, we are always sort of dealing with that based on what we know right now, this minute. But tomorrow, that could be different.
I agree.
So, how do we manage risk then?
Well, so this is what scares me as well, and I'll get back to that question. But I just something as you were talking really twigged it. We were just before we came on, folks. Doug was talking about. I think you were so excited with your 300K line, you were downloading some free manual, right? And it took. I'm assuming it took a wee bit of time for it to get to your house. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
A gig download back then was an evening's work.
Yeah. So just like out of curiosity for the folks that are listening and even here, what do we download on a daily basis? What access do you have to information throughout your day? And how is that increased in an exponential way from where we were 10, 15, 20 years ago to what we are today? And then more importantly, what information are you giving away? Either, with intent or inadvertently that you're providing and offering to the folks on the other side. And what are they doing with that information? And how are they planning the next attack? How are they going to make that next ransomware attack even more devastating? Because they're doing that, and it's based on, just to your point, Doug, that exponential increase in what technology has to offer. Now they're looking at this as what's my attack vector now? How do I map out that attack tree if I'm starting at more than just one entry point? What if I have multiple entry points and multiple pieces of information behind all of that are just as critical to the operation of my business? I'm looking at this great attack tree that you sent me to take a look at. What if I expanded that attack tree now and I include half a dozen entry points? And now where do we go with it here? And that's where I think that's the biggest issue that we haven't faced yet and we haven't tackled yet is that exponential increase in technology. To your point, we look at what's in front of us today and things are going to change tomorrow. How do we, I don't know that we're ever going to get ahead of tomorrow.
No.
Right? This is where that whole concept of being resilient is the only way we can look at moving forward is that there's no way in hell we're going to be predictive enough that we can say, you know what, if I stop smoking today, 5 years from now, my lungs are going to clear and I'm going to feel a lot better. We can't say that in 2 days from now, we're not going to see a 0-day attack that's going to come and potentially cripple part of our IoT or SCADA systems or take a good whack at another instance of Azure. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 days. We can't predict that. So we lost a lot of the ability to be predictive in our approach. Now we have to respond with resilience as opposed to trying to block everything. Now we just have to figure out how do I recover from something.
I think that there's an awareness there. It seems like the boards are coming on more. But there's always going to be those detractors and those ones that are going to say, yeah, I've been funding these things for years and nothing's ever happened. I don't think I need to worry about that. How would you how would you influence that person?
So I love those discussions because the first question I ask is, do you insure your house and your car? Right?
Mhm.
Because what you're doing is you're effectively saying, I don't need insurance because I trust my driving, I trust my house, nothing's going to happen. So, and I've had those actually in the last 4 years. I've had a number of those discussions, and it was always, but we put money in. Like my favorite line from probably about 5 years ago, we put money in this program all the time, and you guys, nothing ever happens. Yep, it's because you put money into this program every year that nothing ever happens. and I caught the person short. They're like, what? Yeah. So you pay for your insurance for your car every year, right? Oh, well, yeah, I do. Okay, and I'm assuming you have house insurance. Absolutely, I always have house insurance. Have you ever made a claim? No. Well, stop paying. What? Well, yeah, no, stop paying because you obviously must be a fantastic driver, and you must live in a fortress because nothing's happening to your house and nothing's happening when you drive. Like how many kilometers a year do you drive? Well, what do you mean? Well, do you drive to work every day? Of course. Do you take the Deerfoot? Yep. All right. Well, just kill your insurance. You don't need it, right? Right? And then it gets quiet. So this is what you're doing with the insurance program. This is what you're doing with the security program. Is we are here as part of that, right? We are actually here to help reduce that risk. And if something does happen, we're here to help recover from it. But if you actually want to kill the funding for Project XYZ or the whole program itself, awesome. That's terrific. Now understand where you're going to be. It's the same as if you were in the middle of Deerfoot in winter and you just tuck your insurance away. How do you feel now? Because I remember doing that in a telephone company or two that we've worked in the past, and I remember asking questions like, "Well, if you really don't want to do this, that's awesome." But I actually I started this thing first as I asked for everyone's wallet and keys, right, to put it inside this bin. Like I brought a bucket, and they all looked at me and said, "You can trust me, I'm the security guy." So they did. They put all their wallet and keys in.
That's pretty.
Yeah, they did. They actually. It was pretty. I was pretty ballsy at the time, but I thought I'm going to pull this off and. Then I asked everybody, look, we got to go home from downtown Toronto. You're going to take the 401. Well, I'm not going to give you your car. I'm going to give you somebody else's. And you don't have insurance for that car. I want you to get home. How do you feel? Well, what? You're a good driver, right? Oh, it's the 8 other people around you worry about. Right. Welcome to the internet, except multiply that by a couple of billion.
Yeah.
And that's how many points they're trying to get access to you. Now, how do you feel? Exposed?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Uncomfortable? At risk? Good. Because we face this every day. How can we help?
Yeah.
Right. And that's when, again, money comes our way and we were able to fix one of the problems you uncovered. But it's discussions. I try to bring it as personally as I can. Like if you absolutely think that this isn't a program worth funding, terrific. But how would you explain not having insurance on your home or your car? And how are you going to explain to the board of directors, to your customers or to your shareholders that this is the project you decided to make a stand financially and kill it? This is where I'm asking you to make that business decision and sign here. Because this is your risk and it's your call at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
And it works, right? Because I've never had anybody pull funding from something that was either consequential to the business, required to move forward, or make an increase in market share or penetration for the market or provide a better service. Yeah.
I wanted to circle back just quickly. Sometimes I've seen in situations where we'll talk about risk or something like that. And, it's like, no, we're comfortable with that. How do we make sure, when we think back to the ransomware people, they actually know who gets to sign on the bottom line for a $2 million check, if that's what it came out to be. And I'm willing to bet it's probably not even the head of the IT department. It's probably a couple rungs higher than that.
Yep.
So how do you make sure that you got the right person saying, I'm willing to accept that, or I think the mitigations that we've put in are adequate and I'm comfortable proceeding now?
Yeah. No, and that's a great question because that and we saw this, right, in a couple of corporations we worked at where we were having, line managers and supervisors signing off on what could have been potentially multi-billion-dollar fails. And when I see that, I just cringe. It's because, your concept of risk is all skewed. So when I look at those types of risk assessments, and I get, one of a company killer, let's say, or another one where, should something happen, the time you're going to spend in court to sort this out is going to far outweigh what you're trying to put out in the market today. So I always look at who is the ultimate business owner, and that's normally at the C-suite. So you're looking at chief operating, chief finance, chief executive, or at least the senior VP or the executive VP in that area. And if it's crossing multiple departments, then I actually will identify both VPs or both C-suite members, because they're the ones who ultimately will stand in front of the press and explain the business purpose behind that decision, right? And it's better at that point for them to be at least armed with the knowledge or armed with the understanding what the risk was, because if something does go sideways and they do accept something that has more risk than we personally as security professionals can tolerate, yet they're willing to go ahead with it, great. But understand, and that's right, I do this all the time, understand at 2 a.m, you're the guy. Like, you're taking that phone call from the press at 2 a.m, because we're going to wake you up.
Of course, we always have to present these things and our data points. And like you say, fewer slides is better. And, other than the money sort of thing, are there certain key points that, like the insurance is a good one, but I've also heard people say, don't try and sell security as insurance, sell it as, well, I like the risk reduction.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that makes the most sense that, insurance is risk reduction too.
Yep, it is. Yeah.
You're willing to cover it because if something does happen, it's not like you get a brand new one for free. There's still deductibles.
Yeah,
There's still
exactly.
delays.
Yeah.
There's still the chance that they don't agree with you and they're not going to pay, or they're going to pay a lesser amount. Yep. And so obviously less is more when you're dealing with people that are, the higher up, they have less time for your messages.
Yep.
How do you consolidate that research down into 2 or 3 salient points? I've seen people that don't seem to say much, and you can just tell they understand what's going on. Yep. And the job gets done. So is it about instilling confidence in the people you're talking to?
I think that's part of it. I think knowing your audience is key, spending some time understanding where the company's trying to get to, and then whatever topic, point, project, initiative you're talking about for that particular day, understanding what that focus or focusing on how does that support the business. And that's key, because most executives, if there is a pilot project or if there's an executive elected official, it doesn't really matter. If there's something that's important to them and they see value and they're trying to bring it into the organization to either increase market share, or increase profit, help citizens, whatever their goal is. If you can understand that and link back your discussion points to how if we do this and help reduce the risk, your chance of success grows by this, right? You have now an exponential chance of being more successful, because we can take away the risk of your data being breached that you're asking your citizens or your customers or your stakeholders to provide to you. But what if you can let them know that there's a level of assurance now that we're going to protect it for them, or we're going to put protections in place that reduces the potential for that data to be lost? What if you can get more people just with those kind of statements? What if you can use the security program and the controls you have in place to bring even more people to the solution, right? So there's always this using the benefit of the platform and the benefit of having a more secure platform. Would that help you be more successful? Could that get you a greater chance of succeeding with this approach if I could take away some of those risks from you by putting in these controls? And it invariably it starts the discussion, but more importantly, they realize that, yeah, from a confidence perspective, they're looking at you now as a partner in the equation as opposed to an adversary. And you become that trusted advisor through looking at the lens of business and what they need to be successful. If you can give them another avenue to increase that success by putting in these types of controls, or at least when they launch, they know they're not going to be, to your point, hacked in 4 minutes, right? That they've actually got some controls in place to give them a fighting chance to gain that market share. Those discussions resonate, I think, better with executives, because you find the positive in the approach. I don't spend a lot of time on how horrific the problem was that we uncovered. What I do spend the time on is, here's the controls we can put into place and the time that we can put them in. And then what if that offered you the benefit of increasing the market share or changing your service level because you have a greater level of assurance, right? It's a safer place to be. It's more secure citizen information. All of those discussions, like all those points, they become more positive, and it's a different discussion than coming in saying, "Oh man, we got to spend $6 million to fix this problem." I rarely, if if that's the only thing I have to go in, I won't go in a meeting with just numbers. I gotta have a story to present them, because there's this whole idea that I love the sentence from ISO 31000. It's the effect of uncertainty on objectives.
Mm-hmm.
But what if I can help change that uncertainty to be a positive effect, right? What if that can be a positive effect, not a negative? Because you're making a risk decision. I want to help you get to the positive side of that decision and look at a positive effect as opposed to a negative one.
Yeah.
And when they see it from that lens, yeah, it's a more productive meeting with the executives at that point.
So if we were going to fix this across the board, you had a magic wand,
other than retiring with a lottery win. So
yeah, plan B.
Plan B, yeah.
How would we educate the people that are in the technology side to get more business savvy?
Yeah. Well,
is there a, it's like, oh, go get an MBA, but
yeah, sure.
In the words of Bill Gates, the fastest way to get an MBA is hire one. Which I love that, by the way. But what could we do as, let's call it, security lay people?
Sure.
Where we don't have that same level of exposure. How could we become more business savvy to start, even understanding what it's like on the other side? We keep saying, oh, yeah, they don't know anything. What do you mean they don't know anything about risk? They waiver risk every day.
Yep.
They have $10 million and $20 million of requests.
Yeah.
Welcome to Monday.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's just before lunch, right? Like, now what?
Yeah,
right?
That's what they got to deal with. And so how do they do that?
Yeah. Yep.
And they're always going to be making trade-off decisions because nothing ever quite goes as planned. So how would we understand that beyond? It's like, well, you could listen to our podcast. We'll tell you, seriously, they got other problems besides, a weak SSL cipher. They really do.
Yep. And I mean,
so how would we get there? How do we get out of weak SSL ciphers or theoretical risk where 8 different things got to go exactly right before, $10,000 worth of damage occurs?
Exactly. Well, I mean, so one, listen to our podcast because we give you some pretty good information, and so do our guests because we've got some great insight.
Yeah, listen to those guys.
Yeah, I mean, look. Remember some of the topics that Larry brought up and how he was looking at the business of security and what he was looking at whenever he goes looking for, new startups and what was his company wanting to do to support and the approach that he takes. That's phenomenal to listen to his, the world that he's living in. Scott as well, like from his approach from the new technology and looking at some of the leading edge work that he's involved in. He's looking at that from both the business and technology. But I mean, what I did, and this is just me, and it doesn't work for everybody, but what I did is I started sending myself to school at home. And it meant reading a lot of business journals and understanding the thought process for an executive when they have to look at a risk. And I still do that. Like on my iPhone, I've probably got about half a dozen business books. The latest one I'm looking at is the CEO who did the turnaround for Best Buy.
Oh, yeah.
And I just started reading that. His approach was amazing. And what it is looking at the human element. So that led to more research for me as well as to start looking and focusing on the human element. So I have a couple of books on the human factor in information security and how does influencing the decision process that a user takes before he clicks on that link. How can you get in the middle of that and make a sustainable change so that they're going to, the lessons that they learn from the training that you provide or the education awareness you give them, it's not only just, to your, you made that point earlier, it's just a punch list. I got to get this done and out of the way. But they embrace it because it's part of their day-to-day task now. How do I change the DNA of that user so that they embrace what we're trying to provide because they see immediate value? So that's when I started reading more about the psychology and the human element. And I think Rochelle touched on that as well, is that she's spending a lot of time now looking at the psychology of employees and users and how can you change and influence that. But where I got some of my biggest value over the years was talking to the business teams. Like, get out of your shell and get out of your office or your lab or in front of your screens and go grab that Tim Hortons card and go take people for coffee and ask them, hey, what's a day in the life of, a finance guy or you guys, the legal guys, we refer to you all the time, but what's it like in your shoes? And I spent time throughout my career talking to the different business teams that I knew I had to work at You don't always get the luxury of speaking to the executive for that team, but you sure can find some wicked smart folks in the director and the supervisor and the manager ranks, and they deal with things, potentially albeit at a lower scale, but the risk decision process that they go through when they're managing a case before it goes to court, or having to deal with an invoice issue, or having to manage a supplier problem, a supply chain issue that they're dealing with. Those business decisions, I had a chance to really listen to what they were going through. And then when I listened to them, the thing I kept coming back to is, okay, well, how can I make their job easier?
Yeah.
Right. Or how can I help them so that I'm not that pain in the ass security guy? I'm actually here to listen to what you have to, to work through and to find a solution. And, right now in my current role, I've stepped outside of the role of the traditional security person, and I'm trying to help out with productivity issues and managing, reduction in call volumes to things like a help desk, or how can we look at addressing issues so that we have safer workforces when they're on the road, or safer travel, or like there's so many things we can learn when we step out of the role that you think you're assigned to. And if you want to ask the business questions about the business, go talk to business people, because it's amazing to hear what those folks have to say, because that drives your decision process when you're making the next security risk assessment and bringing it to life. Now you can think of that. Oh, right. I remember I talked to Bill in finance, and these guys really need to have this in place because it reduces, their rework by half, or it takes away 30% of their manual work. If they can do this task differently, there's a 30% reduction in work effort. Oh, crap. That's really cool. How can I help secure that? Right? When we get to that kind of mindset, that's when you've crossed over from being everything's got to stop to, okay, what if they are going to go ahead with this, how can I make it better for them?
Yeah.
Right.
No, that's probably good advice. Read some business books, understand the business you're in.
Absolutely. Right.
And yeah, definitely. I see a lot of IT people, and I'm one of them. The IT systems are there to enable some kind of a business function of some sort. Yep. And the whole point of the security is to make sure that it works like it needs to, and that you can trust it to do what you think it should. And
exactly.
How many of us even understand how our company makes money?
Yeah. Yep.
Why are we a leader in the marketplace?
Yeah.
If you knew that, that's the thing you should be guarding.
Exactly. What's that differentiator?
Because your competitors are certainly trying.
What's the secret sauce that makes your company successful? How do you make payroll every 2 weeks? Like if you can answer those questions and you can actually understand how money is made. To your point, like we make widgets, great. Well, did you know the widgets sell all over the world? No. We have to actually ship them all over the world. Really? Wow, right? It's an eye-opening experience when you sit back and try to figure out, how does my company run? Like, and I've been really fortunate to have had some amazing tutors along my career where they actually spent the time to say, hey, Tim, this is great. You're thinking about this security problem, but you know what? It's going to screw up this business process completely. Oh, really? How? And then when you get into those how discussions and you ask those, the points that you draw out of that discussion, you realize, oh, crap. I know theoretically this sounded like a really great idea. Practically, it fell on its face, right? There's no way I can put this control in place. Mm-hmm. But that's when you don't get be discouraged. Now you sit back and you go for the next meeting and say, okay, great. What do you think is a good control? And will that work for you? How can we make it? What can we do to put into place that, my theoretical solution was terrific, not going to work. What other options do we have to reduce the risk and that you guys can live with and I can live with? Then you open up that collaborative approach where I don't think we were great at that 20 years ago. I think we're getting better now because we, to your point, Doug, I think more folks are starting to ask the how questions. We didn't ask them before, right?
Yeah. That's a very, very good thing. So as we're wrapping up the year and we're thinking about what could I do different in 2022? Typically in the wintertime, that goes back to reading and stuff. Yeah. So is there one or two books you think us techies should consider looking at? One I'll promote is the Phoenix Project. It's a little dated now, but it really takes you through the reality of how an IT department can be transformed into supporting a business and stuff.
I got a couple. I mean, one I like is it's The Heart of Business, and it's by the former CEO of Best Buy, and that's the turnaround that he did for Best Buy and the organization. I thought that That's and it talks about the leadership principles. It's actually so leadership principles for the next era of capitalism. I thought that was
Okay.
It's pretty cool. I've been really enjoying it so far. Another favorite from Andy Greenberg, it's Sandworm.
Yes.
Oh, I was impressed with that because the approach, like the narrative he knits behind all of that I was super impressed with that, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought that was a good one. And then
and it's got just enough cyber in it to keep us techies interested, but they're sneaking in some business.
Yeah, and you get some of the politics, and you're like, wow, it was a really good story. And the third one that I liked, and this one I'm getting close to the middle of it at least. It's Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning for Business, a no-nonsense guide to data-driven technologies by Stephen Finlay. Yeah, I know it's a long title, but it really does walk through. It takes away some of the noise that everyone's like, oh my God, AI and ML is the way of the future. Whoa, wait a second. Like it has to have some practical application to see value out of it, because you and I both know the investment for an AI or ML platform can be fairly significant. So
that is not pocket change.
No, it is not. And you need to see some business, like real business value, some real business use cases that can actually be worked through in an ML or AI platform. And so Stephen goes through this whole the definitions of AI that everyone thinks they know and ML. He walks through that first, then talks about use cases, and then talks about applicability to business and where you can see this in probably the next 3-5 years. It was a cool approach, and don't get me wrong, that's one of those you kind of got to have a coffee beside you, because it'll go in the weeds sometimes. Like, oh, where was I? And I step back and I catch up again. But I really was impressed with the approach that he's taken, because he puts it in language that a non-techie is going to get. Right.
Yeah.
And to me, I thought that was pretty cool.
No, that's good sage advice. And I think we'll wrap on that. It's been a year.
It's been another year.
We actually have an email address. I've never mentioned this before because I'm scared that there will be spam everywhere, but I believe it is talkback.
Yep.
Talkback at caffeinatedrisk.com.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we sort of put this out there year one as, let's see what we know. But we're part of a community. So what does our community want to hear and stuff too? So I think that would be an interesting thing. So maybe next year there might even be this suggested by a guest, whatever. And
I think that'd be cool. I'm looking forward to that.
No, it's been great, and we'll definitely be catching up again. And I think 2022 is going to be a better year for a lot of it. Let's hope for better things in the future.
Fingers crossed. Thanks, Doug.
All right. Talk to you guys soon. Great. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the latest podcast from Caffeinated Risk. Make sure you visit our website, caffeinatedrisk.com, to stay up to date on what we've been working on. Our website has bios of our podcast guests, posts about topics we're passionate about, and even a library of reference material we find valuable in the work we do every day. And don't forget to subscribe to Caffeinated Risk on your favorite podcast service. This way, you'll be notified when we release our next podcast, and you can listen to our previous guests just in case you missed them. Thanks so much for listening to Caffeinated Risk.